Hi all. These are generally conversations between adults after the children have left the table. The language can be spicy and the subjects can get saucy. So if you're ready, this is the Southern Fork. Unscripted kitchen chats and also studio chats with some of the most interesting voices in the culinary South. I'm Stephanie Burt, a food and beverage writer who travels with her fork to write for a variety of publications, from magazines you might have on your coffee table to the website you love to visit for your favorite recipes. And I'm inviting you to come behind the scenes with me to get to know the people who make this Southern culinary landscape so special. I'm always hungry for the next bite, thirsty for that next sip, and ready for the next conversation. Let's dig in. Although the Southern Fork summer tour is over, we still have a few weeks together, and the weather has started to turn in much of the South. I don't know about you, but soon after I feel that first cool breeze, I can't wait to have a plate of barbecue. Maybe it's because in my North Carolina childhood, barbecue stands, as it were, popped up at church parking lots and auxiliary halls each autumn, using good food to raise money for good causes. But no matter where I am this time of year, I'm thinking about the combo of time, smoke, and the skill of a pitmaster to create this iconic Southern food. The South is full of barbecue styles, each with through lines of technique, but different nuances, and unlike a barbecue purist, I love them all. So in honor of the Fall Equinox, today we dive into the archives for some barbecue inspiration from three who know their way around hot coals. Chris Lilly of Big Bob Gibson in Decatur, Alabama. Tuffy Stone, the professor of barbecue out of Henrico, Virginia. And Hector Garate of Palmira Barbecue in Charleston, South Carolina. First up is Chris Lilly, whose restaurant legacy is the Alabama white sauce.
It started in 1925, so we've got our 100-year anniversary coming up.
Amazing.
I've got my two sons in the business. They're sixth generation, so we've been barbecuing a long time.
Oh, yeah. And let's just get right to it. Southern Fork listeners, if you're a barbecue fan, then you know about white sauce. Alabama white sauce. It's iconic. Chris Lilly's restaurant created this sauce. It is why the Alabama white sauce exists. So let's just dig in a little bit about that. It took me a while because I grew up on Lexington barbecue, Lexington, North Carolina barbecue. And so there's a lot going on there with flavor, and there's more of a subtlety to the Alabama white sauce. That mayonnaise adds a lot of fat and kind of cuts through a lot of the spice. Talk to me about holding that iconic recipe, because it's what made Big Bob Gibson famous, besides good barbecue.
No, without a doubt. That is, Big Bob Gibson was my wife's great-grandfather. He started the business in 1925. We even got clippings out of the newspaper where he was cooking barbecue and serving it as early as 1923. It's the earliest that we found him actually doing barbecue. But we'll hang on to that 1925. Yeah, Alabama white sauce. It's one of his recipes that he started cooking chicken with in his backyard and then carried it over to the restaurant. It is something that he never hid the recipe. So over the years in the restaurant, so many people came to work for him and learn how to make barbecue white sauce that and then did their own spin to it. And it sort of spread out from there. It's like the rock in the pond. People will start doing it, and everybody in North Alabama knows barbecue sauce is supposed to be white.
That's right.
Now,
and there's a ripple effect for sure.
Exactly. And then now, pretty soon, everybody starts serving it. But I view it as a vinegar-based barbecue sauce. You mentioned Lexington. So many people say, "Oh, well, that's mayonnaise." Well, yeah, it is mayonnaise, but gosh, it's got a vinegar base. It's got that high acidity. So I've got to imagine that Big Bob Gibson back in the early 20s, when he's cooking his whole pits of chickens in his backyards or at the restaurant, the chicken came off, and he was looking for a way. Yes, he loved the vinegar-based sauces. He had two sauces. He had a vinegar-based salt hop, sort of an Eastern North Carolina sauce, and then the barbecue white sauce. He loved that acidity. But when you're cooking 50 whole chickens, in your backyard, and you pull those up, you've got to have a component to keep the chickens from drying out. And the mayonnaise was that component. So it is a vinegar-based sauce with a little mayonnaise and black pepper and lemon juice and salt, and then it goes on from there.
And I always wanted to ask this question because growing up in Charlotte, it was more of a dipping sauce when it, got to us, because we were ranch dressing. So it was just like another ranch alternative. I love some ranch dressing too. Do you marinate the chickens in it before you smoke, or is it a mop after?
You can actually do it a lot of different ways. You can absolutely use the white sauce as a marinade, although the vinegar is a pretty, high ingredient in it. So I don't use a ton of vinegar on the front end. So in the restaurant in Big Bob Gibson, every chicken that came off the pit got dipped into a vat of white sauce. So it is a dipping sauce. It is, when it comes off the pit, it gets dipped in the white sauce and held for our customers. Or it doesn't stay in the white sauce, just a quick dip and then out of it. And then we cut them up for our customers as they order those, and then serve the white sauce on the side as well.
This is your wife's family, and you have really created your own identity and brought this very important family business into a new realm, which is not only making great food at the restaurant, but you're a competition barbecue guy.
Yes, and we fell into that. That was sort of on accident.
Yeah.
When I started working, I learned to barbecue in the pit rooms at Big Bob Gibson's.
It's not a bad education.
Not bad at all.
Right.
And that's where I started. I didn't just jump right in and say, okay, I'm going to, with my father-in-law, I'm going to run you, help you run the restaurant, and everything. I learned it from the ground up. So I started in the pit room, and to this day, that's my favorite place, without a doubt, in the barbecue restaurant.
Next up, Tuffy Stone reveals his passion for the science of smoke. And it's really interesting, you were talking about more really how you were able to see the smoke as a flavoring agent, and that it should have a level like salt and pepper.
That's right. I like to treat smoke like salt and pepper. You have a really good memory, Stephanie.
Explain that, please.
It's like so I got this barbecue pit, and I got this hickory, and I got these pork butts, and I made a rub, and I lit a fire, and I seasoned these pork butts, and I put them on the pit, and I ruined this big old load of meat. I probably shared that with you last time we talked. And I got a neighbor. She's still my neighbor right across the street, Sue Brown. And when you make barbecue, there's all this meat. And so I would bring all my neighbors, this barbecue.
You were experimenting. Yeah.
And she would be so happy. I'd knock on the door and say, hey, Miss Brown, I got some barbecue for you. And one day I knocked on her door, and she said, Tuffy, I still have some of the last barbecue that you gave me. And it struck me. She didn't want my barbecue. Why did she not want my barbecue? And it was because it wasn't very good. And the reason it wasn't very good is because I was over smoking. There's lots of nuances to really taking a tough cut of meat and coaxing something great out of it. But one of the things that I think a lot of us make a mistake with initially is not regulating smoke the right way. And I read a book by John Willingham, who was a really legendary barbecue guy. And he wrote in his book, smoke is dirt. We're cooking. We're not smoking. And that just really stuck with me.
Because smoke, literally, let's just be nerdy in chemistry.
Yeah.
It's depositing carbon.
That's it.
Onto the meat.
If the fire doesn't breathe, it's going to create this creosote, and you're going to have these bitter, off-putting flavors. But his words just stuck with me, and I started to think back on like, well, what about when you had to bake a cake with an oven that was all wood burning? They probably knew better than anybody how to try and run a clean fire. A clean fire is a fire that breathes, and when that fire breathes properly, you can look at the smokestack, and you'll be hard pressed to even see the smoke. You really want it to be light and clear. And so I started to obsess on watching this fire and trying to manipulate the wood to where I could really get a good clean fire. One of the things that's really great about people that cook with a burn barrel is when we burn this wood down to coals, and then we shovel the coals underneath the pig or whatever it is that we're cooking, we've already burned off all those impurities, and so it's a pretty mild smoke. And I made a lot of bad barbecue initially, but
and this is on your days off when you're
right.
You're still doing the 40,
stuff.
50. Yeah. So you're like, got the tweezers out, and then the day off.
The tweezers out. I love that.
But then, here you are doing this on your day off, but it just kind of caught you creatively.
It did, and it was interesting, Stephanie, because I didn't think that. I think because I could make chocolates, and I could make all these, sauces and sushi and all these different cuisines. I always say barbecue is like the friendliest food. It's such an approachable food. I've never had anybody ever be intimidated.
And let's just say for non-vegetarians.
It's really scary.
Yes.
If you're a vegetarian,
right.
It can be really.
This might not be the episode for you.
No. But, well, you can still glean something out of this because even if we're cooking non-meat items and we're cooking vegetables, we still want to treat smoke like salt and pepper. And so you can still go out there to your grill if you have one. In my cookbook, I did so many grilled vegetables, and I had a lot of fun with it. So vegetarians, it's okay. We're talking about how to cook with fire, and you can cook whatever you want with fire.
And finally, Hector Garate takes us through learning whole hog from the smoker up. When was the first time you had Carolina barbecue? Do you remember?
The first time I was on the wrestling team for Green Hope High School, where I went, and they had a caterer. And this caterer brought vinegar-based whole hog barbecue, and that's the first time that I tried that specific style. And I always remember it because I was like, man, this is so good. And I think it has to do that we have a lot of vinegar too in Puerto Rico, and just the flavor was so simplistic. The smoke was just like, it was just great. And if I was like, this is a type, of barbecue I would like to eat, and I did. I went and ate that type of barbecue all the time when I was in Carolinas because I loved it. So yeah, that was the first time I tried the Carolina style barbecue.
And then how did you develop? I think a lot of people listening, they follow the person that they like, but then they need to develop their own style.
Yeah.
And your style comes from smoke and fire. So how did you decide and develop that?
So it was a combination of different styles for sure, because there's so much information available with the Texas style of barbecue. My wife bought me an offset smoker, which I still own. It's like a little smoker, Oklahoma Joe's. From there, I started developing. So I was like, what can I cook with this? What cuts can I? Because I had the smoker and I wanted to produce a good product. And I started cooking brisket. So brisket was like, I went head on. Let's do brisket. And I spent like a lot of time developing the brisket, trimming, understanding the aerodynamics of it, how much pepper, salt, everything in it. And then I started adding my own sazons and different things. Developed the brisket, putting out a good product out of that little smoker, surprisingly. But what happened in that process is that I fell in love with the process.
It's popular for a reason.
Yeah,
Oklahoma Joe is very popular for a reason.
Yeah. So
they can sponsor me, by the
way. the process of cooking was what I staying all night and all that. I was like, if I can do it here, I can definitely do it in a bigger smoker because it's easier when you're cooking bigger smokers than smaller smokers. You learn better fire management in the smaller smokers because it's so tedious. You have to every 20 minutes put wood. It's like 116, like there has no insulation. It's just not built for that. It's just kind of like you want to get into it, see if you can do it here, and then kind of move forward with that. But I learned brisket really well. And then from there, I decided that I needed a bigger smoker, and I didn't have the money to buy a bigger smoker because they cost a lot of money. So I decided during the pandemic that I went around all over South Carolina and started getting free tanks. I got decommissioned propane tanks. I went to boneyards and found all the scrap metal, sheets, pipes, everything. And then went to Harbor Freights and bought a $200 welder. And then I said, like, okay, now I need to put barbecue aside for a second. I need to learn how to be a welder. So I did that. I went full on, learned how to weld everything, and then started putting together my smoker, which took me like 6 months to do because I wasn't a professional welder by any means. But I put it together. I managed to build a trailer too, everything. And from there, I was like, okay, I got the smoker. Let me start smoking on this. And then I was like, now it's time to, I felt like, because I've been smoking so much before, the Texas style kind of thing. And I was like, all right, I need to implement all the things. So I was smoking already like pork, but I was doing parts. Mm-hmm. So from Marvin.
Like shoulder.
Yeah, I was
butts,
buying shoulders
like
from
that.
Marvin and just doing that. And from there, I was like, okay, let me build like a whole hog cooker. So I built like a cinder block one. And I started cooking whole hog. So I called Marvin, I'm ready for the whole hog. And I cooked whole hog with him before, like in butcheries with BJ Dennis, him, his family butcheries. Like, you know, you harvest a hog and you do all those. So I've been invited to those things before with him. And yeah, that was a really great experience to see all that and started cooking whole hog.
So you're learning from some of the
Yeah,
best.
like Marvin is like walking me through a lot of things.
Yeah.
Because it's different than the way we do it in Puerto Rico.
And that's Marvin Ross of Peculiar Pig Farm in Dorchester, South Carolina. You can go to thesouthernfork.com or dive into the archives on any podcast app, and you can listen to a whole episode with Marvin. But anyway, sorry, had to get that in there.
Yeah,
also, there's a whole episode with BJ Dennis, who he also name dropped. But go ahead.
Yeah. So, and then from there, we did our first pop-up in collaboration with Marvin. So he did the whole hog for that pop-up, and I did all the other stuff, and he did some sides as well. And then we did our first pop-up, and it was highly successful. Everybody was, you know, loving it, the food, the flavors. But it did develop a lot after that. And then I decided we have the smoker, everything. And then from there, I was like, I'm not doing brisket no more. That was the turning point for me, because I went really deep inside of me, and I'm like, do I want to be like everybody else, just competing to do brisket or competing to do the same thing? And I'm like, it's really not me. I mean, I learned how to do it. It's great. I can execute it. Just because you know how to do something doesn't mean you should do it. So I was like, you know what? I'm going to find a different cut that I like more. And beef cheeks was the one that I liked the most.
And that was what I loved most on Sunday. They were like little tacos. Can you walk us through what they were?
So the tacos have shredded beef cheek on them. I also did the slice form of it, which people love as well. But the tacos was basically a plátano. We make it into a tostón, and we fold it into a taco shell. And then we added the beef cheeks, and then we put our sauce, we put pickles to kind of brine it up, and just cotija cheese. And it's just like, it's so simple, but it's next level.
Is next level. If you want to learn more and hear the full interviews from these three, I've put the links in the show notes. Thanks for listening, and I look forward to being right here next week.
You've been listening to The Southern Fork. I can't wait to bring you more culinary conversations, but in the meantime, I have one question. Are you going to eat all that?